This is Combat Sports Live. In our latest episode, we get caught up in the world of UFC news, starting with UFC Fight Night Condit Alves in Brazil, Bosch Henderson in New Orleans, UFC 188 Velasquez Verdum, UFC Fight Night in Berlin, Machida Romero in Hollywood, and UFC 189 Mendes McGregor. We also have a very special guest in the form of Jason Heit, a Canadian mixed martial arts legend. So keep it locked here for the next 60 minutes. Combat Sports Live starts now.
So why even rush? We got the shit in the bag, and if it's dragging along, we roll the weed and Dutch.
All right, we are back for another episode of Combat Sports Live after a bit of an extended layoff. We're ready to get right back into it and start off where we left off from UFC Fight Night Condit versus Alves. Let's just skip to the nitty gritty. Let's get down to the good stuff. Let's talk about the co-main event between Nick Lentz and Charles Oliveira. What did you think of that one?
I thought it was an excellent fight. It was a long time coming. Nick Lentz had a couple of injuries. Hadn't been in the cage for a long time, but they've been going back and forth for at least a year and a half now over canceling matches that they were supposed to have in the past. And I thought it was a really well-rounded matchup. Lentz started off strong. Oliveira took over a little bit. Then Lentz came back again. And in the end, Oliveira came back strong and won that fight.
Yeah, it really speaks volumes about Nick Lentz's style. He's such a grinder, and he definitely has the gas tank to match his skill set. But I wasn't surprised to see Oliveira. He's definitely an up and comer, and I'm looking forward to his next matchup, which is just coming up here pretty quickly.
Yeah, I have to agree. Nick Lentz is an excellent fighter, but it's cage rust. He hasn't been there in a long time. He's had a few injuries. Oliveira's in a bit of a roll lately, and he's so talented. With his jiu-jitsu and his striking, he's definitely such a well-rounded fighter. He's tall, he's lean, he uses his range very, very well, so I can see big things coming for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see how his range stacks up against his next opponent, which is another really talented and decorated striker in Max Holloway.
That's going to be an excellent fight, and I'm really, really looking forward to seeing that one in our hometown, not our hometown, but our home country, Saskatchewan, is going to get a big fight out there, and it's nice to see.
In Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, absolutely. We're going to have to keep our eyes peeled for that one. All right, let's move right on to the main event. What a main event it was between Carlos Condit and Thiago Alves. Man, this was going back and forth. Both guys were bringing it, but man, Condit is just a killer.
I have to agree. Condit came back in dominating fashion. Alves actually came back in a dominating fashion win over Jordan Mein, he's being dominated by, and he came back and took his time and breathed and showed his veteranism and took apart Jordan Mein. It was an excellent fight, but Condit was making his first appearance since a year ago when he suffered a torn ACL against Tyrone Woodley. There was a lot of questions to answer, and Condit answered them all with a very statement-like type performance. He hit him with that big left hand early in the second round and dominated from there and basically destroyed Alves' nose. It was like on the other side of his face. Condit had a lot to prove. He'd heard a lot of rumors about the fact, he lost that very close fight to GSP. He was that head kick that rocked GSP. You never know, that could have gone the other way, and Carlos Condit could have been the champion. And then the really close, controversial win against Nick Diaz, and then, the very, very close matchup with Johnny Hendricks that could have gone either way, that Hendricks got the decision, and then all of a sudden the torn ACL as he fell against Tyrone Woodley. So he's had a lot to prove, and he's definitely one of the best fighters in welterweight history. So I'm looking forward to seeing him come back hard, and he came back hard, and he's looking for a number one contendership.
Yeah, and I think he's definitely earned it. And this definitely speaks volumes about his resilience, man. To come back from those type of injuries and some of those tough losses and come back even stronger against a really tough guy like Alves. It shows me a lot about Condit, and he's definitely one of my favorites for those reasons. All right, we got lots to cover, so we're going to keep rolling right on here. We're going to move right on to UFC Fight Night, Tim Bosch versus Dan Henderson in New Orleans. That was a hell of a card, a lot of finishes. What did you think?
Oh, it was one of the best cards I've ever seen, actually, and it was excellent. I think everything ended in the first round. 9 of the fights were knockouts, and it was just an excellent card to watch.
Definitely, and let's work our way up to obviously the big and exciting main event. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit about Sean Jordan and his big high kick KO over Lewis.
It was really amazing to see Sean Jordan come up with a performance like that. I've talked to some guys that he trains at Jackson Jackson and Winklejohn, and a couple of guys say there he's just a warrior, an ex-football player. You know, he spars and he trains like he's in a fight constantly. So it was nice to see him throw kind of a finesse move in there, because you expect him to try to bang you out and get aggressive, but you never expect a big guy like that to throw like a spinning kick or a high kick like that for a knockout win, and it was very impressive.
Yeah, exactly right. It's just the athleticism on the big guys like that. Super impressive. Right, so from Jordan and Lewis, let's talk a little bit about Brian T-City Ortega and Thiago Tavares. That was a hell of a fight.
Yeah, Ortega's been a guy that you've been looking at for a while now. You've been watching his career for a while, and you actually mentioned it to me that this guy's going to be good, and he looked awesome. Like, such a well-rounded fighter. Tavares, a veteran, I was thinking to myself, okay, maybe Kyle might be wrong on this one, because Tavares has had, 30-plus fights, whereas Ortega's only had 8 or 9 fights, and none within the UFC, but man, he was relentless, and he's a future superstar, and I have to give him credit for showing such an well-rounded game, striking to ground, to conditioning, to sweeps, to submissions. It was an amazing fight. One of the fights of the year, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was really busy off his back the whole time. I really like that. Some nice, crisp, dirty elbows from the bottom. And what I was really impressed with, despite his, short tenure in the UFC, is his composure. He got in some tough spots, and he did get rocked, 1 or 2 times, but like he just kept grinding and just broke him down and took him out. So big things coming from T-City. We're looking forward to his next fight for sure.
Excellent, for sure. Do you know what he's got coming up?
I don't. I haven't seen it yet, but I will definitely keep my eyes peeled. All right, so moving on to the next one, one of my favorite guys, Dustin the Diamond Poirier versus Yancy Medeiros. Really great to see Poirier back on the winning track.
Oh, it was extremely excellent. Like, Poirier just showed, how good Conor McGregor really is.
Yeah.
Because Poirier came back to his regular 155 pounds. He didn't feel as tired as he said afterwards, the day before coming into the weight cut. He felt strong. And Yancy Medeiros is a really tough gentleman. Trains with top-notch guys, Jake Shields, the Diaz brothers, Gilbert Melendez, and Poirier was having none of it. He came in there with some beautiful strikes, some feints, dropped a left hand on him, dropped him, got on top of him, took his back, had a very slick, tight body triangle that you could see draining all the energy out of Medeiros. And then Medeiros actually scrambled out of it because he's such a tough guy, got to his feet, and then Poirier let him have it again. Left hook, right hand, and it was a really good performance.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to take anything away from Medeiros, especially when you're training with the scrap pack. You've got a big team of studs there, and he's got everything he needs to, the tools to get the job done. But unfortunately, he came up against a brick wall in Dustin Poirier, and I'm really looking forward to him. He looks healthy. He looks strong at 155, so I'm looking forward to his next test as well.
I have to agree. I think he's got a chance. 155 is a little bit open. I think he's got an opportunity to slide in there and maybe get into a number 1 contender shot.
Yeah, I think 1 or 2 more big matches this year. I think he could even squeeze in maybe 1 more big fight this year, and then maybe a top 10 in early 2016.
I have to agree.
All right, let's move on to Big Ben Rothwell and Matt Mitrione. Before, let's even talk about the matchup for a second. What was with the way he was walking out? It looked like it was a throwback to WWE 1996. It looked like the Undertaker when he was coming out.
Rothwell's, he really wants people to believe in who he is. He's trying to make a statement. He's doing a lot of talking. He wants people to take him seriously. So he's doing everything he can to get noticed. And, I think it's kind of exciting. I mean, he comes out to fight. He comes out to hurt people. So he might have a little bit of a WWE entrance, but when the cage door shuts, he's all business.
Yeah, he was definitely a mean dude. And he came in there with one motive, and that was to take out Matt Mitrione in spectacular fashion. And he did exactly that. The way he applied, it was just like a front choke, but he applied so much pressure in like a matter of 1 or 2 seconds that he had Matt Mitrione tapping with both hands like he was like a wild chicken.
I know. Suddenly the heavyweight division has become exciting. We mentioned Sean Jordan. There's a whole string of contenders out there. Rothwell, after a beautiful knockout after Alistair Overeem, he applied that beautiful front guillotine to Matt Mitrione that you mentioned. And, Mitrione's an ex-football player. And, he's a great striker. He's light on his feet. He's got good footwork. And he got in there. And, he doesn't have much of a ground game because he hasn't had the experience of a Rothwell who's trained with top-notch, a submission artist his whole career. And he came in there and they traded a couple of punches. And Mitrione seemed like he didn't want any part of it. So he went for a double leg and just left his neck exposed. And it's almost like he was trying to get out of the fight. So I'm kind of wondering what kind of level Mitrione's going to be at. He's an exciting guy. He talks well. And like I said, he's got a good stand-up game. But mentally, I don't know if he's got what it takes to take it to that next level heavyweight championship wise.
Yeah, exactly. He just did not have his head in the game, and one man that did was Rothwell, and he had murder on his mind. It looked like he was going to squeeze his head off the way that he applied that pressure on that guillotine.
So who would you have next for Ben Rothwell? There's so many
Big Ben
matchups.
Rothwell. I would love to see when JDS comes back healthy, something like that. Because obviously I'm a fan of JDS, but I think that a guy like Rothwell would really bring it out of him. He would really bring the fight out of JDS. But I think his technical striking would probably maybe earn him the win. But who knows? You know, Rothwell's on the up and up, so we're gonna see what's next.
That's
for him.
what I wanted to ask you about. You've always been a JDS fan. One of your favorite fighters, and he was in Mexico. I saw him riding the treadmill. He looked really, really healthy. He was front row, and I thought he was going to be the guy that got the fight right after this. But now they're saying he has another injury. Do you have any familiarity about what it might be? Or
no, I haven't heard specifics yet, but I've definitely been very carefully watching this one because I'm eagerly awaiting his return. I thought he'd be the one to jump the cage and challenge Verdum, but. Not only did that not happen because of his pending injury right now, but it really seemed like Dana White wasn't interested in that matchup right away either.
I don't understand that. There's so many good matchups there. There's a lot of guys licking their lips. The most recent guy that called out Verdum, and that never happens, is Overeem. So, I mean, they've had a long, outstanding little beef there. So, I wouldn't mind seeing that. I wouldn't mind seeing Rothwell, Mitrione. There's a whole bunch of guys in the mix right now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm really looking forward to who's gonna make some room in that heavyweight division because there's a few guys that are clamoring towards the top, and it's gonna be there's gonna be some great matchups.
I definitely agree.
All right, now we're going to move on to the main event between Dan Hendo Henderson and Tim the Barbarian Bosch. I didn't really know what to expect with this one. You never know when you get up to a guy, of Dan Henderson's age. I think he's 44 now, if he's really going to be able to bring it. But once again, he silences all the critics and takes out Bosch in devastating fashion. Yeah,
I definitely agree. Just when you think Dan's career might be over, he comes out with a huge 30-second knockout against a very tough Tim Bosch. Dan's been an idol of Tim's. And he made this mistake of coming out, showing respect and trading right hands with him. And that's the worst thing you can do with Dan Henderson. He landed that H-bomb, followed with a left hook, and it was over. And, Tim Boach is a really tough, durable athlete. And like I said before, he admires Dan Henderson. He looks up to him. So a lot of people asked me about this fight, and they thought Dan Henderson might be on his way out. And this would be a big fight for Tim Boach to enter the top 10 and get himself back in position for maybe enter, a title shot in the near future. But just the way he talked about it, the respect he had for Henderson, I just knew that he wasn't going to do the smart thing by going for a double leg or keeping his range. He was going to come in there and trade with him, and that's what he did, and that's how it ended,
Yeah, that's exactly right. A little too much respect, a la GSP Matt Hughes round one. So maybe Bosch will go the way of GSP and get another crack at him before Hendo says retirement. But he definitely gave him way too much space, way too much respect. Didn't get in his face, didn't grind him out, which is what you need to do against a guy like Dan Henderson, is get in his face and make it a gritty fight, which would have, I think, played into Bosch's skill set perfectly because he is a grinder, he's super durable, but he's nasty when he's in tight.
I totally agree. I think Boach should have taken his time and looked for an opportunity to tie Dan up against the cage. He's off the testosterone therapy now, and for a gentleman that age to be taken suddenly off that medicine, which we call it, is going to be hard for him, and that's why you, like you said, grind him out, clinch him up against the cage, stay in your underhooks, fight for position on the cage, drain that energy, but don't come out 30 seconds and start throwing right hooks and left hands with him because you're feeding right into what he needs to do with the situation he's in.
Yeah, big power hand. Exactly right. Tell that to Michael Bisping.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so moving on from that, we're going to go to just a phenomenal card, which was UFC 188, Cain Velasquez and Verdum. Man, but before we get into the big boys, let's start a little bit further down between Nate the Great Marquardt and Kelvin Gastelum. Decent fight. It's a little bit sad to see Marquardt go out in this one because I'm not sure we're going to see him again in the octagon. But what did you think of this one?
I thought it was a pretty decent fight. I thought Marquardt, was definitely, as he said afterwards, affected by the pollution and the elevation, yep. And it definitely affected him a lot. And Gastelum, who's a Mexican and, has spent some time there recently, just did his thing. He was frustrated with the fact that Dana White wasn't letting him come back to 170. I think he was sick for his last fight with Tyrone Woodley and wasn't able to make that weight cut, and that affected him. So he came out there and he just put on a solid performance, kept it clean, didn't take too many chances, and just outworked Nate Marquardt.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was definitely a tactful performance. He wasn't overcommitting to everything. His power shots weren't overextended. He was pretty calculated about the whole thing. But I want to get your opinion on this. Do you think this is the end of Nate?
Nate's just had a baby. He's got a beautiful family, a nice house, and I think he's financially made some good money, and he's able to coach and working at certain gyms. So, you can never tell a guy that he's done it depends how he feels. But to me, I don't want to see him put in a position where he's going down this long road of losses.
That's it, especially when you take some losses like with some serious damage against do you remember that fight went against Tarek Safadine? Safadine brutalized his leg. I bet you he's got permanent damage on that leg. He's some some internal scar tissue, I think.
There were some devastating leg kicks. If you could, I mean, that was beyond purple. There was a blue, purple, red. That's a different kind of color he had on his thigh from that constant barrage of leg kicks.
Yeah, exactly. So, how many more fights like that can you actually take? And I don't think he has anything else to prove in the sport. He's done some amazing things. He's fought some really tough guys. His roster is a who's who. So yeah,
he's a 7-time Japanese Pancreas Association
of course,
champion.
Yeah.
You look at back in the day, I think Boss Rutan won it twice. Frank Shamrock won it once. Ken Shamrock won it twice. But
seven times,
7 times, and he spent a lot of his career over there. So people, he was halfway through his career when he got over to the UFC. I believe it was UFC 58, Canada versus Russia, where he fought a gentleman. I think it was Dirksen, Joe Dirksen.
Joe Dirksen, yeah, El Dirte.
Excellent fight, and I just remember I was actually live in Vegas for that fight. I was just really impressed with Mark Court's skill set. It was just, he looked like the up and coming new guy. And he really was until he ran into our old friend Anderson Silva.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so moving on from Marquardt and Gaston, let's go right into a barn burner between Gilbert El Nino Melendez and Eddie Alvarez. Hell of a fight. I wasn't that surprised because Alvarez has been on a bit of a tear lately.
I was impressed. It was a great fight. I was kind of a little bit disappointed in Melendez. He came up with a beautiful short elbow in the first round and just closed Alvarez's eye.
Yeah.
Cut it up and shut it. He was one-eyed and then decided to sit back and wasn't aggressive at all for the next 2 rounds, maybe thinking that he had won the fight with a decision. But Alvarez kept fighting with one eye and I thought on my scorecards, as well as the judges, sneaked out those last 2 rounds in around a 3-2 decision. And then shortly after, we find out that Melendez, who doesn't have a physique like that at all, tests positive for high testosterone levels and now suspended for a year.
A 1-year ban. I was not expecting it, especially out of the scrap pack. The only thing I've ever heard out of that team is marijuana use. You know what I mean? So to hear PEDs, especially on a guy like Melendez who doesn't have that ripped physique, I don't really understand it. I'm not sure if it's just something, a lot of these times these guys do have nutritionists and they have, meal coach guides. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt until we find out some more information, but it's surprising and disappointing to say the least. A year is a long time to be out of the sport.
It's disappointing, and it's disappointing that he didn't do much in those last 2 rounds, and you let Alvarez, who showed a lot of heart, who had a lot to prove after the loss to Donald Cerrone in his first fight in the UFC after having so many excellent performances in Bellator and Dream and Pride and those other organizations. So it was really nice to see Alvarez get a victory there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really goes to show, who wanted it more, who actually wanted to win the fight. And he showed that he was that guy, and he went and took it.
100%.
Yeah, he took it for sure. All right, so moving on from Melendez Alvarez, let's go to the main event between the big boys, our longtime standing champion, Cain Velasquez, versus the up-and-coming intern champion in Verdum. Hell of a fight. Didn't quite go the way I was expecting, but you brought up a lot of good points in this one.
Yeah, I really believe that Verdum has had over 36 fights. I mean, I can go back to Pride 2002. He's there fighting, Nogueira and Overeem, and he was so smart. He went over there a month before, Spanish and Brazil are very similar languages. He rented a house in the highest elevation part in the city of Mexico, and he trained there for a month ahead, and he got used to the elevation, and he stayed down there and he trained and he got used to the people, and he was so comfortable down there. And then, on top of that, Cain Velasquez is a very relaxed tactical opponent. He hadn't fought for almost 2 years, and Verdum used the great strategy of saying that you're not really Mexican, you're from the U.S., and it upset Cain, and it made him angry. He didn't want to shake his hand at a couple breakfasts before in Mexico. He showed up a week after. He was totally at the weigh-ins. He was so angry, and it took away from his calmness. And I thought it was just a great performance and a mental edge for Verdum throughout the month before and the fight.
Absolutely. I think this fight was probably won a month before it even started. I think that his tact and his strategy was just ideal. It was on point. You get up to the elevation a few months ahead of time. You get your body, unfortunately to say this, used to the pollution and used to that air quality, and it does volumes. And it really looked like Kane was not the same person, and Verdum was able to turn it up and put it on him and finish him off with some really solid work.
I have to agree with you. I think a lot of people underestimated the elevation and pollution in Mexico City. A lot of them went up to Bear Mountain, and a lot of them Big Bear in California. A lot of other guys went up to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where the elevation's high, but they didn't realize
it's not that high.
It's not that high, and they figured out when they got there. And Kane should have showed up a couple weeks before. He got into that fight kind of angry, and he was, when he fought another big guy like Bigfoot Silva, you watch that fight, you could see him using lateral movement and head movement, moving side to side and letting Bigfoot walk into his punches. This fight, he just came straight at him, walked right into his tie clinch, was, walking into punches. Like Verdum just sat back along the cage and just used his reach and let him walk into punches. So he made it very, very easy for Fabricio.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's now the undisputed heavyweight champion, and we're really looking forward to what's going to come next for him. I wouldn't mind seeing him fight one more time in 2016. Who it's going to be, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we're still waiting to see that. I mean, Kane is hungry now. He's come back in the media and said that he wants to be back in October after that 2-year injury, not being able to compete. I think he wants to get right back in there. So whether they give that shot to Verdum, who might be injured as well, or they give him somebody else, it's going to be exciting to see who the next picks are for these guys.
So do you think because Kane has been a pretty dominant champ, he deserves the immediate rematch?
I think he does deserve the immediate rematch, but I think that we also heard that Verdum suffered a couple of injuries during that fight, so I'm not sure if they're going to be ready at the same time.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that one unfolds. All right, let's move right on to a UFC Fight Night in Berlin versus, bear with me on this name here, Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Jessica Penne. This was over before it began. It really looked like a child playing with a professional. It was hard to watch, but it was pretty impressive to watch as well.
She's a world-class athlete, and I think there's only a couple of really good Brazilians that might be able to give her a matchup, because she's had over 70 Muay Thai fights, and as long as she stuffs those takedowns, you're in a lot of trouble. She's got really one of the best short elbow games in the sport. The way she can throw the right hand, then switch it to an elbow. Then after you go for a shot, she stuffs it. And as you stand, she throws the right elbow at your head while you're standing. Perfectly legal and very well executed.
Yeah, exactly. She's got really crisp hands. I know she has the full Muay Thai game as well. I haven't seen too many knees from her yet, but what I was really impressed with her hands, how she's mixing up to the body, to the head, to the body. She's really, she's ripping her to the fucking liver and then dropping the hands and then taking her back upstairs. She's like, it looked like Penne had no previous boxing experience against Joanna.
I totally agree, but we have to give Jessica some credit for taking a beating. Her nose was on the other side of her face, and she kept coming and she kept fighting, and blood everywhere, and she didn't, even when the ref stopped, she goes, "What are you doing?" So I got to give Jessica Penne credit for sticking in there, working hard, and trying her best against a very, up high level opponent.
Absolutely. Hats off. Big credit for not giving up, because, a lot of people probably would have after getting the beating that
a lot of people would have.
That she took. I certainly would have well before. But now we're looking at a very dominant champ in Joanna. I think she just came off successful thumb surgery. At first, I think she was opting not to have it, but after I've seen some hospital photos the other day, it looks like all is well. She's all smiles, so we're looking forward to seeing who she's going to have coming up next.
And she's got a great personality for even though she's Polish and she's limited with her English. I mean, she's a different kind of animal. She's hanging out with Chris Weidman at the UFC 189 event this week, and she's just, a lot of people really like her personality, and she's a fun girl. She makes the weigh-ins really cool with her little gifts and her mental warfare, but she's actually a really nice person on top of that. So it's good to see a European champion with that kind of pizzazz or that kind of flair,
Well, that's it, exactly. And one would be worried because of her lack of English that she wouldn't be that good of a sale, but she has no problem selling herself. She definitely, gets in her opponent's head and gets in, she looks nasty at the weigh-ins, and I really believe she's going to be champ for a while. She said herself that she wants to be the Ronda Rousey of the division, and at this point, I don't see any reason why she can't be.
And the way those two seem to really, really admire each other. So don't be surprised if you see some training between those two. I'm sure she could help. Ronda could help Joanna a lot with her wrestling and judo, and I think Joanna could help Ronda a lot with her Muay Thai and her striking. So together they could maybe actually be really well training partners together.
You're right, exactly. Joanna could help Ronda and Tarverdian at the same time. Edmund, right?
Edmund, yeah, for sure.
I think Edmund could learn something from Joanna the same.
Yeah, and Edmund's, he's had some, the loss by Travis Brown, who we now know is being falsely accused of assaulting his girlfriend, who he hasn't seen in 5 weeks, who, put bruises on her body and put them on Twitter, and now he's been pulled out of his next fight. And, it makes perfect sense because when he fought Arlovski, his hands were down, his legs were so widespread. You could tell that mentally he wasn't himself, and hopefully we'll get to see him come back and beat these allegations as well.
Absolutely, because that was a tough thing to hear. Just when you hear him in interviews, he just does not seem like he has that side to him. So no. I was definitely taken aback by it, and I hope that his name is cleared and he gets back into a fighting soon.
Exactly.
All right, so we're gonna move right on to the very next card actually versus so it was Lyoto Machida and Yoel Romero in Hollywood. Hell of a card. Only we're going to talk about a few here. Before we get to some of the main guys, I want to throw a little shout out to Steve Bosse. He's a Canadian legend, and he finally got a shot in the UFC, and it was not the outing you were looking for. It was a short night for Steve Bosse.
It was a short night, and he's a really tough guy. Like you said, he goes to war every time he fights, and he just got caught. He got caught, and he got caught good, and it was a highlight reel knockout for Santos. Yeah,
it was, absolutely. And I think Bosse took it on somewhat of short notice, so I hope they do reward him with at least, one more fight in the UFC against the guy, he can show his real skills against.
I'm sure they're going to bring him back. And there's going to be a Canadian show coming up here, Calgary, Montreal, and they're going to bring Bosse back for sure.
Yeah, I think Bosse is a Montreal guy, so he would love to probably fight in his hometown and see if he can get in there. Okay, so let's move on to another guy who has been making waves since he's been, moved back up to a more natural weight in Lorenz Larkin.
Excellent. 170. I mean, he's not getting overpowered and clinched along the cage, and he's able to use his striking, and he's in his right weight class. And what an excellent performance he had. And I'm looking forward to seeing him compete again. I wonder who it could be.
Oh, absolutely. His kicking game is just on point. You know what I mean? He throws a kick as fast as any jab I've ever seen. You know what I mean? It's just the fluidity to all of his movements. Yeah, he looks great, and he looks healthy, and he looks strong at 170.
I know. I wouldn't mind seeing him and Masvidal actually fight, because they're both changing weight classes. They both had one fight each at this new weight class. They're both looking really dominant. So, and it would be just a technical kickboxing, striking war. So I'd be really looking forward to see a fight like that.
That is a great matchup, definitely. They're both, absolute veterans. Masvidal's only 30 years old, and he's got 28 fights.
I know, that's amazing. That's amazing.
I can't believe it. And obviously Larkin, he's got some of the best stand-up in the game. So
he's definitely a natural athlete, that guy.
Yeah, I think that would definitely be a back and forth war, and I'm not even sure who I would take in that one. All right, let's move right on to the main event between Lyoto Machida and Yoel Romero. I didn't really expect it to go this way, although I gotta admit I wasn't sure what to expect, because obviously we're worried about how Yoel's wrestling is going to stack up against Machida. If Machida's going to have stuff to take down, but it didn't even go like that. It was a short night for our former champion.
I think Romero's proving that he's a good stand-up fighter as well. He's such a big, solid, strong guy. He's an Olympic silver medalist. He's a real dangerous guy for anyone. I'm sure Weidman and Rockhold and Jacare, who are very confident athletes, I'm sure that's not the first guy they'd want to pick to fight. And, Machida, I thought, came back a little quickly. He's an older gentleman now, and he's had a lot of fights in the UFC, and he took some big shots from Luke Rockhold. So I thought maybe he should have stepped back and get his game back and figure out what he was going to do, instead of taking this, to fight Romero and Rockhold back to back in like just a couple of months' time is a real dangerous situation.
It's a very tall order to come back, off a tough loss from Rockhold to take on a guy like Romero. Romero is, you talked about, silver medalist at the Olympics, but not only that, he's got some very heavy hands. And what I was really impressed with this last fight is his cardio. And you think because he's a wrestler, he has this amazing cardio, but previously I've seen these heavy hands slow down in rounds 2 or 3 because, he's carrying around a lot of muscle. He's a big guy.
I think he's being pushed to the limit. I think he's got a great team at American Top Team. I think he's got a lot of guys pushing him to that next level, and he's a dangerous guy. You don't want him to get on top of you. And Machida made that one mistake. It was a fairly close fight up until that point, but once he gets on top of you, think about it. How do you control his posture? He's like a silver medalist wrestler. Look at the size of his head, his neck, his shoulders. You try to control his postures, and if you slip, he drops a couple elbows on you, and it's a short night, and that's what happened.
Yeah, and for a shorter guy, he's actually got a pretty decent reach.
Very decent. He does long arms for sure.
Yeah, so we'll see how he fits into that murderer's row at the top there, because I wouldn't mind seeing him and Jacare, actually. I think that would be a pretty interesting matchup.
I think that's the fight we're going to see. I mean, there's a lot of juggling going around right now with Weidman saying he's not sure, somebody might be injured, and maybe Rockhold and Jacare should fight first. But I totally agree with you. They've made the decision. I don't agree with it. I thought Jacare should have got the next title shot, being 36th, being undefeated in the UFC. He lost to Rockhold in Strikeforce in a very close decision. Nobody really did anything to each other there, whereas Rockhold was knocked up by Vitor Belfort. But they made the decision to go with Rockhold. They're expecting the fight in New York, but maybe they might switch that now to that new stadium that's being built in Las Vegas, the 20,000 person stadium. So I think you go with that now, and I agree with you. I think you have Rockhold, Weidman. That's what you told the public's going to happen, and I think you have the fight that should have happened before with Romero and Jacare. The winner of that fights the winner of that. I mean, that's the way to go to me.
Yeah, and I think those matchups make a whole lot of sense. So let's hope the UFC brass agrees with us and let's these play out. All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we return, we're going to be speaking with Canadian mixed martial arts legend Jason Heit. Don't go anywhere. Combat Sports Live will be right back.
Moving in, they at the door, but they just won't hold it. Should have expected cold shoulders, but once I get into the spotlight, damn right, I'm a showboaty. Holy moly, never known me to be faithful, but you couldn't sign up for it thinking this was stable. Just get me on the payroll, I'll stay gold, and I've been fighting for this since we was a day old.
God only knows what we're fighting for. God only knows what we're fighting for. God only knows what we're fighting for. God only knows what we're fighting for.
Yeah, screaming out freedom like the great William Wallace. They gonna ban this tape in every state, city, and province. I stay spitting that bullshit, they hate it but can't stop it. When it go up in flames, I'll be blazing sticky chronic. Now tell me, why would you fight a war? Don't know what you're fighting for. Try and rebel, they lock you inside of a cell. The psycho wrote all of the rights ignored without having to sign a form. It happens behind closed doors, shots you reach your minds of war. Your privacy don't exist, nobody's safe inside their homes. They got us on a surveillance, webcams and microphones. Filling the sky with drones, got no use for my attorney. The tides are turning, the Bible's burning, shorty, the fight is on. For the poverty-stricken fathers, mamas, and children, hard up and living without a pot to piss and robbing and stealing. To the wrongly convicted, locked inside prison. To the baby you armed to kill in the name of God and religion. Can I get a hoorah?
God only knows what we're fighting for. God only knows what we're fighting for. God only knows what we're fighting for.
All right, and we are back. That was the latest from friends of the show, Dockside Green, with their latest What You Fighting For. All right, without any further ado, we won't make him wait any longer. We'll get right to our guest, Jason Heit. He's from Island MMA in Victoria. Jason, you've had a storied history in the combat sports. Thanks a lot for taking the time to sit with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right, let's jump right into it here and talk about your origins of combat sports and how you really got interested in the whole fight game.
It really started at 4 years old. Oddly enough, I was watching Rocky with my parents at a drive-in, and I watched it, and right then and there, I knew that that's what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I was just really drawn to the sport, and started with boxing, number of boxing matches, from tough man contests to representing Canada on the national team and Pan Am Games, and just went at it, kickboxing and MMA and professional boxing, and now on to coaching. So been at it since I guess my first fight was 1991, and my last fight was probably 2008. So yeah, it was a good time.
Quite a long run you had going there. What was your record? I know you have quite a substantial KO amassed over your career.
Well, between boxing, kickboxing, and MMA, there's definitely professional between MMA and boxing, I went 12-1. And altogether with boxing, kickboxing, and MMA, I think I had about 47 fights and won 43 of them. Wow. And a lot of knockouts, but I think 37 knockouts.
That is substantial with a few guys looking at the lights. So let's backtrack a little bit here and talk about, you were saying what originally got you interested was watching Rocky. And there's an interesting component to this because one of your first boxing managers was Burt Young from Rocky, was he not?
Yeah. Burt Young, who played Paulie in Rocky, was my manager, which was a pretty cool thing to have, and definitely a little trippy when you're in between rounds and you're looking over and there's Paulie yelling at you, giving you instructions. It's pretty surreal.
Yeah, I can imagine. So can you tell me maybe how you got hooked up with Burt Young and that whole, I guess, boxing scene in LA at the time, I believe?
Sure. When I went to I moved to LA to pursue boxing as a profession. I just thought it would be pretty challenging to do that out of Victoria. As much as I love Victoria and it's home, it's very difficult to be a high level professional fighter out of here unless you're doing camp elsewhere all the time. And I just figured if I was going to move, I might as well move to what I thought were the best places. And, I was in New York for a bit. I was in Vegas for a bit. And I ended up settling in LA. And I was working as a bouncer at a nightclub called the Whiskey Bar, and very well known nightclub down there. Was owned by Randy Gerber, who's Cindy Crawford's husband, and just had a really good clientele as far as people in the music and film industry, and really good spot. And anyway, Burt Young would pop in there every once in a while, and just started chatting with him. And then next thing you know, we were talking about boxing, so he asked to see a tape of my fights, and I got it to him, and then he got it to Lou Duva, and between him and Lou Duva, they got me going in my pro career.
Wow, it sounds like a lot of the opportunities that you had came just from bouncing at the Whiskey Bar. Can you talk a little bit, maybe more about some of the interactions with people that you had at that time?
Well, it was definitely a very interesting place to work at, and it's pretty interesting because a lot of the clientele there was very high profile, and a lot of the staff, I had great friends with the staff over there. Pretty interesting to see where some of them went on to. One of the guys ended up writing for Entourage, the television series Entourage, and when it comes to the interactions with the with the celebrities and stuff that were in there, like I said, very high profile clientele. It was interesting to, for a kid from Vancouver Island to all of a sudden be rubbing elbows with, you name it. They were in there, Nicolas Cage, Lenny Kravitz, Mark Wahlberg, you name it. They were all regulars there. And it was just a really, really interesting time. And
so it sounds like that experience with bodyguarding maybe led you into the temporary career path of protection work. I know we've spoken about this before in terms of, going on a world tour with Robbie Williams and stuff, but can you maybe just walk me through your protection work career and how it all came about and how it ended up?
Sure. Well, I always knew that, realistically with the combat sports, you're going to need some sort of exit strategy, with it. There's not many fighters that are going to actually retire off of, boxing, kickboxing, and MMA. It's very few. So, I knew that I needed some sort of exit strategy out of the sport, and I was drawn to executive protection. And I did a fair amount of security work because I thought it worked out very well with the lifestyle of training. You could, bouncing was great because you could train all day and then go to work at night and work a 5-hour shift and just save your energy for training. So to me, it worked out really well with for that. And I had done a number of courses to get me as much experience as I could for that type of work. And then I just ended up working for a company ended up working for a executive protection company, and then eventually going out on my own. And with the contacts that I had made there, it was, just had a lot of people that were looking for that type of, service, and just ended up going into that full time for a couple of years.
Absolutely. So back to, I guess, the Robbie Williams World Tour. How long was the tour? What was your involvement? What was the experience like? How was it like being away from your kids?
Well, it was a really neat experience. It was an incredible opportunity. I mean, that was about a 2 years of employment, and traveled everywhere. It was at that time he had signed the largest record deal ever, which was, I think, about $200 million US for five albums, and had a worldwide tour, and which was an incredible opportunity to be a part of. But, I guess after a while, like for me, I just started to get sick about the lifestyle of always being on the road. And especially as a father, with children, it was just too much travel, and decided that I had wanted to come back to Victoria to raise them here. And ended up coming back, and being in Victoria is pretty challenging for that type of work here. There's not very many people that would need that type of a service, but I still occasionally do that type of work for short-term projects, but nothing long-term. Yeah, so busy with running Island MMA and all the guys on the fight team here that it's hard for me to go away for long periods of time now.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely sounds like you got lost on your plate. It'd be tough to balance between the two.
Yeah, Jason, Keith Nadasen here. Great to have you on the show. Just wanted to have a little funny story that we had. I know when you first moved out to Las Vegas and Los Angeles, you were working as a sparring partner for some high-level athletes like James Toney and stuff. And one story that I remember hearing from someone that was really kind of funny and might keep the fans entertained was a story of you were dating maybe a high-level model at one point, but you were making like $40 a day as a sparring partner. So I was kind of impressed with the fact that you went all the way out there with nothing and were trying to make ends meet. And I believe you were living maybe in a travel lodge or something at the time, and you were maybe driving a scooter, and she didn't know that, and she showed up one day when you weren't expecting it, and that was a really funny story. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Sorry to put you on the spot there.
Yeah, it really put me on the spot here. Yeah, I was definitely a poor amateur athlete in those days. I was on the national team and Canadian national boxing team, and boxing out of Las Vegas at that time, and in the gym with what was Donnie Lalonde and Eddie Mustafa Muhammad and James Toney and Dale Brown, and there's a lot of great guys that we were with. But I was pretty, really poor at the time. And on top of it, I wasn't actually able to work down in the States either at that time. So it was pretty tough to make ends meet. But anyway, my mode of transportation was a scooter. And in Nevada, they're basically like bicycles. So I was cruising around in my scooter, but it was definitely pretty hard to pick up girls on the scooter. So if they'd have, if the girl that I was dating is like, oh yeah, well come pick me up. I'm like, oh yeah, my Harley only has one seat. So anyway, it turns out it wasn't a Harley. It got busted pretty good for that little white lie.
That's going to happen. So while we're on the topic, I wouldn't be doing my journalistic due diligence without asking you about some of these celebrity encounters that you've had along the way. I've heard some rumbling, something about Chris Pronger. Can you tell me a little bit about altercation you may have had?
It's probably best to not talk about that. I can't really name names when it comes to these types of things.
That's fair enough. I can leave that one be, but I wouldn't be doing my part without asking. How about anybody else that you've come across your past? I heard something possibly about Drew Barrymore.
Oh yeah, I worked for her for a little bit. Very nice lady, was happy to work for her. Unfortunately, it was not the greatest circumstances that we were working for, just because, unfortunately, a lot of these celebrities have people that can pose a bit of a threat and a bit of a problem But yeah, I worked for her for a bit, and yeah, it was a lot of fun, and yeah, she was a nice lady, and but yeah, no, it gets difficult to talk about stories with a lot of this stuff, because there's generally a confidentiality between you and your clients, right? So it's hard to talk about a lot of things, right?
It might be something you say for a future book.
Yeah, it's possible.
I think that would be something definitely the fans would want to read. All right, we'll get off the celebrity gossip tip for a second here, and we'll move on to something else I've got some big interest in. Around when the Ultimate Fighter was blowing up, around Ultimate Fighter 7, you went to tryouts. Can you tell us a little bit more about that experience?
Sure, yeah, it was... I think it was season 7. It would have been Rampage and
Forrest Griffin.
Forrest Griffin were the coaches for that. So I was brought down. UFC brought me down to Vegas for the tryouts, which was great. At that time, it had been a while since I'd competed in MMA, but was still training and was still coaching and very, very active in the sport. And they brought me down. And unfortunately, the trials for that show are kind of weird. You really don't get to do a lot to showcase, but at the same time, it makes sense because you bring in. I think they brought in around 70 athletes for that, and you bring in 70 guys that are all competing, want to be on this show. I mean, they're going to try to kill each other. So maybe in the long run, it's best that the tryouts aren't too physical. But it was, I spent 5 days in the hotel down there, and that's Pal Station Hotel down there, just jumping through the hoops for the show. And at the end of the day, I made it all the way to medicals, and I think there was about 40 of us that made it through medicals, and down to the last 32 to fight their way into the house. But unfortunately, I never got that opportunity. So came really close. Would have been nice to get a shot on that show. But never did get the opportunity to fight.
Yeah, actually had the opportunity at UFC 158, Canada versus the US. And I actually had a good time with Forrest Griffin. We got to hang out a little bit and we had a chat, and he actually remembered you and was really surprised with their criteria for actually picking the finalists, because he felt that he'd watched some mild sparring with you and Tim Crater, Matt Brown, Amir Sadala, and Jesse Taylor, who were the top guys in the division and the top guys in the show. And he actually believed that you might have been one of the top 2 or maybe even the best in that class. So he was kind of surprised that you didn't get the opportunity to showcase your skills a little more, and that was kind of disappointing. So I'm not sure how you felt about that, and if you felt that you had a good opportunity when you trained with those guys and you had a good feeling of how you felt, how you could compete against the main guys in that show.
Well, I mean, at that time, I was in great shape. I was on top of my game, but the television show is a television show, and at that point in my career, I mean, I had a ton of stand-up experience, but not a lot of MMA experience. And then I ended up having, getting more MMA fights, and probably if I had, more MMA fights under my belt, would have probably got in. But I don't, for whatever reason it was, I never got selected. But it was beyond my control, and unfortunately, I didn't get in. And again, it would have been nice to stick around in the sport and see what I could do. But I am not the biggest fan of how the athletes are treated in this sport. And by the organizations out there, and the pay scale and all that, the lack of proper insurance policy or disability and all that. There needs to be improvement on that for the athletes. So, those are a lot of the reasons why I never continued to pursue the sport and see what I could do in it. I just felt that the compensation at the end of the day wasn't worth it. I mean, they were offering $3,000 and $3,000 back then, and even today it's maybe $6,000 and $6,000, still pretty low. And guys are getting 2-3 fights a year. it's tough, really tough game. I mean, hey, if you're great, you'll rise to the top. But I'd really like to see the sport on par with other high-level professional sports. If you look at something like the NHL or something, I mean, rookie salary on that is around $400,000 to $500,000 per year. Rookie salary in MMA is not much.
Yeah, exactly. About eight grand to show and $8,000 to win. Not a lot to make ends meet, and let alone pay the rest of your camp. But on the same tip right now, while I've got you talking about it, UFC released their health and safety, I guess, just some information leading up to maybe that they're heading in this direction. Do you think that it's actually a possibility that they're going to have, fighter insurance, and then we're not going to maybe see as many potential injuries in the future of the sport? Or which direction do you see this heading?
I don't know, but if they actually want to break through and be on par with the major sports out there, I mean, I know that. I mean, their books are good. They're making money, and as a business, the UFC is doing well. But as far as the reputation with the common people, you know what I mean, with the masses, it's pretty well known that these guys aren't well taken care of and looked after. I mean, if you're the champion, maybe, there's a few of them that are, but majority aren't. And I think, for them to actually really break through to that next level as a professional organization, they're going to have to just keep improving their standards and taking better care of their athletes, because it's a rough sport. It's a dangerous sport. There's a lot of injuries, and at the end of the day, all these guys are going to have to go on to some sort of career, afterwards, and hopefully they're not too busted up, because they're not getting the wages that they can retire off of.
And that touches on a very important subject, Jason. Actually, their books have come into question recently with the purchase of Strikeforce and the fighters' lawsuit against the UFC for being unfairly treated. Do you think this health and wellness program is a smokescreen, something they've been forced into making happen for the public and for their own franchise, as far as the topics that have been brought up within the court system lately?
Well, they have got a fair amount of bad press lately. I think a big fact is due to the lawsuits that they're getting from having the monopoly and basically not allowing athletes to work in other organizations or have other forms of income. So. Yeah, I mean, if they want to keep the fans happy, the fighters happy, and do what's right, they're going to have to keep improving. And ultimately, this is still a new sport, and it's going to take a while for it to evolve and be what it needs to be. And it's no different than the NHL or the NFL or Major League Baseball. All of those guys had to fight, to get their share of the pie. And, it took them all, to form unions to actually do it properly. And, maybe someday the athletes will get together and form a union. And, but until that point, without unity, a united voice, there's really not much that's going to happen. I mean, bit by bit, it'll happen, but ultimately it boils down to a united voice of the fighters working together, because they're the power. The athletes are the power. That's the workforce. Without the workforce of the fighters, the UFC is nothing.
Yeah, not to switch topics here, but we're going to get a bit ahead here, and wanted to ask you a little bit about the Pacquiao-Mayweather fight that we experienced on May 2nd. What you thought of the fight. To me, it was exactly what I thought it would be. As soon as they got Kenny Bayless as the referee appointed to that fight, and it seemed to be more of a Showtime production, and it seemed like HBO's rights were after the fight. They were able to show the show, and so I felt it was exactly how it would have worked out, and a lot of fans were really upset with the fact fact that, they thought it was a boring fight and they thought Mayweather didn't do this and he ran and stuff. But I know you have a different opinion as a professional boxer. So what's your opinion of the fight and what you actually thought took place and if you enjoyed it? And
Sure. Well, hey, I get that that the fans want to see two guys just go toe to toe, right? I get that, but the reality is the science of boxing is about hitting and not getting hit. And, I think Mayweather put on a great display of that. Sure, you can say he ran and he moved and he held, but that's how you defend yourself. And he was busy enough to counter him and win the majority of the rounds. Again, I think, I'm a huge Pacquiao fan, but I would have liked to have seen Pacquiao try to be more aggressive. I don't know what the extent of that shoulder injury was, and I wasn't the one taking the punches, so that's pretty easy for me to, say watching on the couch that, hey, Pacquiao should have been more aggressive, but I wasn't the one with the shoulder injuries and getting punched. But to me, it was a great boxing display, and that's what you're going to see with Mayweather. You're going to see boxing. If you want to watch, there are tons of brawlers out there, and tons of other exciting fighters out there. You look at the last couple of fights that we've had. The Canelo fight. There was your war. But I think a lot of the fans kind of need to pay a little more attention to who they're watching and the style of the fighters they're watching. And if they know the styles of fighters they want to watch, then those are the guys that you should be fans of. But if you're not a fan of a defensive boxer, then I just understand what you're getting, right? And if you don't like defensive boxing, then watch brawlers. Because there's a lot of great brawlers out there too that put on really exciting fights. But to me, I really appreciate good defense. I really do, because in this sport, it's vicious, man. It's a vicious sport. Be it boxing, kickboxing, or MMA, they're vicious sports. You have to know how to not get hit if you want to get out of this sport with your health intact.
And if you watch that fight with the volume off, there's different ways to look at that fight and different ways to score that fight. And of course, the general.
Yeah, he was the aggressor the entire. Pacquiao moved forward and was the aggressor the entire fight. I still don't think he won, but he did win a fair amount of rounds.
You're exactly right. And some of those rounds, they were so close. And, I know you and I believe in a very close round, you have to give it to the guy that's moving forward, the guy that's aggressive. And I thought that fight was a lot closer than the judges had it. I had Mayweather winning by 3 and maybe a draw round, but not by 7 or 8 rounds like some of the judges had it.
Yeah.
All right. As much as I hate to cut you off with the Mayweather-Pacquiao talk, because I know you guys could talk for hours, we do need to move on. But before we go, Jay, we would love to give you the opportunity to plug your gym down in Victoria there, Island MMA. It sounds like a pretty great gym. Tell us what's going on.
Oh, yeah, we got lots of stuff going on. We've got, basically we try to have a really good foundation of combat sports. We have an amateur boxing program. We've got an amateur kickboxing program. We've got amateur wrestling going on. MMA, a little bit of everything. Kids classes, a Krav Maga class. So lots of stuff going on. And hopefully, if anybody out there wants to ever come on in, check out the class, you're welcome to come in, give it a try. And we love the training of martial arts. It's so good for the soul, keeps you fit, keeps you healthy, keeps you in a good frame of mind. And my partner there, Stan Pederek, world kickboxing champion, has just a great philosophy and home of the humble warrior. So it's a great place, and hopefully we'll get some people out there to come down and give it a try.
Jay, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show today.
All right, thanks, guys.
Once again, that was Jason Heit of Island MMA in Victoria, BC. We are now going to switch gears and take a short break, but when we return, we're going to be talking everything UFC and getting all caught up inside the octagon. Don't go anywhere. Combat Sports Live. We'll be right back.
Kinda boring, it's like a war. Despite it, why ignore it? It's ride or die, so hell, it might as well be worth dying for it. Just know there's more to see. Don't think it was born to be. Condition my environment now, it's supplying more to me. I'm mind disorderly, born more than just quarterly. With stories and more corners than yours, sure to be told. apportioned equal. Distorted people with more seed to restore evil. The poor and feeble, we quarantine with the warm meal without cash, trying to sew the patch up with the war needle. And all we need is just peace of mind. The reason I'm even up to speaking is grievance against the weak and I compete with time with heathen lies, deceiving lives. They need divide, but fear the power we combine.
God only knows that we're fighting.
All right, and we are back once again. That was the latest from Dockside Green, What You Fighting For. All right, let's get right back into it and dive back into the fights that happened not too long ago, and what a night of fights it was. First of all, on Saturday night, we had probably the biggest UFC of the year, and one of my favorites that I've ever seen. Definitely had my favorite fight that I've ever seen. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But was UFC 189 back in Las Vegas. We're gonna work our way up to it because there's a lot to talk about.
I'm telling you, I seriously had a couple of small heart attacks. That was the greatest show in UFC history, and nobody can argue with that. In the past, you'd say, okay, maybe UFC 100.
Blew the doors off
UFC
100.
148, maybe this one, maybe that one, but there's not one person that can tell you that they didn't think that was the best fight. Everyone had laryngitis, people were sweating I was with, and I've been watching fights with these guys for years, a lot of pro fighters, and people were running around like little kids. It was like an amazing night.
So many finishes, exactly. And it was probably the bloodiest UFC I've ever seen in my life. That canvas was just crimson.
It was incredible. The knees, like, the knee from Jeremy Stevens and the knee from Almeida. And it started off, with the Dirty Bird and Matt Brown getting things started in the finals of the prelims, the main event of the prelims, and it just shot off from there,
Yeah, no, that was a hell of a way to kick it off. Man, what a quick finish that was. I was expecting a little bit more from Means, but and we'll get there in just a minute. Let's start with talking with Mike Swick and Alex Garcia. I just wanted to talk about this one quickly because it was obviously the return of Mike Swick after a very, very long layoff. And a lot of people thought that Garcia, of course, did come out with the W, but a lot of people thought Garcia was going to make short work of Swick, and it was a pretty competitive battle.
I think Swick put on a great performance. He's got that Muay Thai school in AKA, so I'm not sure how much grappling and how much world-class wrestlers, strong guys, like, this guy's, the Garcia's built a lot like Hector Lombard.
Yes,
Once he gets on top of you, it's going to be almost impossible to get him off. So I'm not sure how many guys like Swick had like that in Thailand to put him in that position. But, I have so much respect for Mike Swick in the first Ultimate Fighter season. They talk about Bonner and Forrest Griffin, but Mike Swick's like a 170-pound guy, and he was fighting in the 205-pound weight class and actually lost a close decision to Stephan Bonner to even make it into the finals. So I think this guy deserves a lot of respect. He's one of the guys that cleared the path for the UFC. He fought a young, tough guy out of TriStar Farazi's camp, and a guy that's coming up big, and he just got controlled on the ground. But I have a lot of respect for Mike Swick, and if it's over for him, it's not. It is. If it isn't, I still love the guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think after a performance like this, after against a really tough and upcoming guy like Garcia, he at least deserves one more. He's a pioneer in the sport. He's definitely paid his dues. So I think we see him once more, and hopefully we can get one of those Mike Quick Swick KOs like he started it all off with,
or a Schwickatine.
Yeah, the Swickatine, exactly. Yeah,
we'd love to see something like that.
That would be great. So let's talk about this next one that we were speaking about just a moment ago here between Matt the Immortal Brown and Tim the Dirty Bird Means. I thought this had all the makings to be a gritty, dirty, in-your-face, elbows, knees, cardio battle against these two warriors because they both bring it and they always both come forward and neither of them take a step back. But it wasn't that. It was Matt making quick work.
Actually, it was, though. The Dirty Bird had some unbelievable short elbows. They were almost like Joanna Jurkovic kind of elbows. He rocked Matt Brown with a couple of short elbows. He's got really long arms, and he almost threw his elbows like punches. And Matt just overcame that with heart and determination and experience. And Brown's a dangerous dude. And, anytime you see him in a fight, it's a fight. You can't slow him down, and he used that experience and he finished the bird.
Yeah, he definitely did. And one thing he really said that I thought was very genuine of him to say after the fact, that getting on, this is the first time he hasn't been on the main card in quite a while, and so it was kind of like not a breath of fresh air, but it was the wake up call that he needed to be on the prelims and be like, okay, I do have some little more work to do. I need to prove myself and show these guys why I deserve to be on the main card and maybe be headlining once again.
I have to agree. The Dirty Bird Means it was a really tough a fight for him. He hasn't fought Robbie Lawler. He hasn't fought Johnny Hendricks, the two top guys in the division. So he's just learning and he's just getting used to building his way up in the sport, right? So Brown was a high level opponent for him, and Brown proved it that, hi, I fought these top notch guys, 1 and 2 in the world, and you're not going to beat me. And he did it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, spectacular. All right, so we're going to move on from Brown and Means to Thomas Almeida and Brad One Punch Pickett. Obviously, One Punch, it's in his name. He has the power to make it a short night for anybody. But this Almeida guy, he's undefeated. He's coming up. He's a phenom, this kid, and he showed him why he's the next big thing, I think.
I thought it was an excellent performance. Brad Pickett was down to 125, and he said he just didn't have the power down there, and you could see he looked drained. I don't think it was a good weight class for him, even though he's a smaller guy. He's a heavy hitter, so I think he's better at 35. Dana White leaned over to Mike Tyson before the fight and said, listen, this kid's 19-0. He's a monster. And Tyson looked over to him and said, you never know until you see him in deep waters. You never know what this kid's going to be like till he gets hurt. And after Mike Tyson said that, that's exactly what happened. Pickett dropped him a couple times, hurt him, cut him up, and then he came back angry and aggressive, and one of the best knees we'll ever see. Actually, we saw two of the best knees we'll ever see in this final. Flying knee knocked out Brad. His head hit the canvas so hard. I mean, what an amazing fight.
Yeah, it absolutely was.
And Almeida's 20-0 now. So, I mean, what do you do with that,
No, and I think he needs to, be careful about his next opponents now, because he has all this hype behind him that I think he can kind of take a little Conor McGregor, pick and choose your way to the top here.
I like his technicalness. I like the way he stands up tall. He keeps his hands up really high and his chin tucked low. So he's a smart fighter, and he knows what it takes to be successful later in his career.
Yeah, he's got those fundamentals, but he's also got the flashy stuff as well. He's a really dangerous guy, and I don't think a lot of people are going to be signing up to fight him anytime soon. He's a tough matchup.
But I actually totally agree with you. You've got a superstar here, and he's learning. He just had the biggest fight of his life, and the first time where he's actually been pushed, where he's actually been hurt, and had to come back and win. So I agree with you. He's a future superstar. So don't, like a Paige Van Zandt, don't throw him to the wolves right away. Let him have a couple fights, build himself up, and then maybe he'll be ready for a title shot in a year and a half to 2.
Yeah, let's give him some momentum. Let's give him something to work towards, because he's definitely on his way to a title shot, and he's going to sell himself with a record like that. Dana White doesn't need to do any marketing for that guy. 20-0, give me a break that. I don't know another guy on that kind of.
How old is he too? That's another thing when you talked about Masvidal being 30 with 28 fights. How old is
Almeida? I'm not sure. I think he's less than 25. I'd have to look it up. But
I think he's 23. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. He's a pretty impressive individual. All right, we're going to move on from Almeida and Pickett, from Dennis the Menace Bermudez and Jeremy Lil Heathen Stevens. I was wrong in this one. I thought Bermudez was gonna be able to take him out, and Lil Stevens just hit another gear, and he was nasty in this fight.
I agree with you. I thought Bermudez was going to take the fight, but then I was unsure because Stevens came in 3 pounds heavy, and when he weighed in, there was no discussion of why he didn't make weight, but he came in, he weighed in, and he flexed at the scale. He didn't look disappointed, and Dana didn't look mad, and they didn't look angry, so you could tell that there was some kind of a health issue that he had, and he was going to take the fight anyways, and it prevented him from being able to cut the weight. So I was kind of unsure whether he was going to be healthy enough to fight, or whether that big size difference was going to make a difference. And Bermudez, I think he could have won that fight, but he kept coming forward. He's trying to put on an exciting fight, but he's not protecting himself. And a couple of times, I thought he was winning the fight, and he got caught a couple of times. And that last time, that knee was just devastating.
Flush. It landed flush, and I don't think anybody could recover from that one.
When are you ever going to see one knee knockouts in a row again? That was amazing.
This card was just stacked. It was everything we wanted and more. Oh my God. But moving on from Bermudez and Stevens, Bermudez will be back, and Stevens, this is kind of his foray into just putting a few wins together. He was kind of flip-flopping back and forth. So, I think they're, despite their differences in the division right now, I think they're both kind of, they both still have some work to do.
They definitely do.
All right, so we're moving on from Bermudez and Stevens to the co-main event, which easily could have been a main event on its own, could have been of its own headliner, and I thought it was definitely a better fight, probably my favorite fight of all time. Without further ado, Rory, the Red King McDonald versus Ruthless Robbie Lawler. Holy shit! I don't know what to say about this fight.
That was literally scary, and those guys got the $50,000 bonuses, but they should have got $100,000 bonuses, because both those guys took years off their life. I don't even think we know where part of Robbie Lawler's lips are, and there's parts of Rory McDonald all over that cage. I mean, those judges had the scoring 3 rounds to 1.
for Rory.
Rory going into that last round. So, but that last punch by Lawler and was just so devastating that Rory couldn't take it anymore. I mean, I can't believe the punishment both these gentlemen took, and it was just a world-class fight. You know, I wish Rory would have handled it a little bit differently. You know, Rory kind of stands in front of you and throws a long jab and throws that front kick to the body. It hurts you to the body, but I don't think you can stand in front of Robbie Lawler. I think you got to move laterally, and I thought he should have. He went for 2 takedowns and Robbie stuffed him, but I thought he should have looked back at the Daniel Cormier Anthony Johnson fight, and he should have just kept forcing takedowns, forced him against the cage, drying him out, make him fight on the cage, take him to the ground. Eventually, you're going to get him there.
Yeah, exactly right. Follow the Cormier template, because it's a very similar type of guy. You know, very dangerous, Anthony Johnson, but Cormier, you know, wasn't afraid to stand with him, but kept him guessing with that, you know, with that high level wrestling. But you know, it wasn't meant to be. Poor Rory, and actually poor Robbie too. Like you said, they both took an abuse. Robbie had that giant piece missing from his lip. I've seen him now. Looks like he world class surgeon, obviously. So it looks like that'll heal up fine. Rory, I've seen his post fight pictures. He looks like just like a swollen mess. But good on both these guys for leaving it all on the table. And there was a nice picture of them both in the hospital as well, kind of saying, you know, giving mutual admiration and respect for each other, which was really nice to see.
I really have to agree. I think Rory, he's 25. As long as you never know how a guy's going to come back from that kind of a pounding, both guys. And, you know, Robbie just proved that he's not going to be around that much longer. And I think if Rory can come back healthy and learn from this experience and be as strong as he was, he's definitely going to be a future champion. Whoever he fights next for a title, I think he's going to win if he can get back there. And Robbie probably won't be there still.
You're right. But so this brings up another interesting possible matchup, and this can be an absolute snooze fest. But I think it's inevitable now that we're going to see Lawler Hendricks 3. But like, let's be honest, who wants to see that?
I'd like to see, you know, I think Lawler's going to be out for a while now. I don't think so. I think
he should be. I would give him a 6 months, you know, at minimum.
At minimum 6 months. So I think Hendricks, even though he wants to sit around and wait for the title shot, I don't think that's going to happen. So, you know, I think I agree with you. Some people are saying Tyrone Woodley, but I think it should be Carlos Condit. I mean, fight was so close. Some people saw it for Hendricks. Some people saw it for Condit when they fought in Montreal. And I'd love to see that rematch.
Yeah.
And that's what you called earlier, and I agree with that.
Yeah, let's see how it unfolds. All right, now let's move on to, you know, the most anticipated and definitely the most hyped fight I've ever seen in UFC history, versus Chad Money Mendez and Conor McGregor. Where do we begin?
I don't even know where we begin. I guess we begin with Sinead O'Connor coming in.
There you go. That's a great place.
They bought those Grammy lift stages from the Grammys, and you could look up there and, you know, you could see, even though she looked like the guy from Tragically Hip, her voice was electrifying. You could see it sending bone chills through the audience, especially the Irish audience. And I think it was really great to see. And that's where we started. And from there, it was just a war.
Yeah, it definitely was a war. I really liked Mendez's approach to it. He really got in his face and showed he wasn't afraid to stand with Conor. Hit him with some big shots. You know, Conor was obviously, you know, goading him a little bit, saying they weren't rocking him, but he hit him with some pretty solid shots. It's
pretty amazing because, you know, Conor really tells the truth. He said that he doesn't feel these punches that these featherweights hit him with. And to me, like, Mendez hit him with some big shots that knocked out Ricardo Lamas, who's got a great chin.
Yeah.
And he took those shots, and you know, Mendez got him down. And I mean, Conor's really got to start to try to work on his takedown defense. I think he had a couple injuries, and maybe he was overwhelmed with the media obligations because, you know, he was just walking forward with his hands down, his head straight up. Like, I know he won the fight with his great range and his accuracy and power with that left hand, but he's got some things to clean up before he fights Jose Aldo.
That's exactly right. And there's something really interesting after the fact that somebody said, and I haven't seen an X-ray of it yet, or I haven't seen an MRI of it yet, but apparently somebody was saying that Conor McGregor was fighting with a torn meniscus.
Yeah, yes, he was.
Torn meniscus, throwing that many kicks.
Yeah, I know.
What are you thinking, man? But good on him. You know, you're a warrior. You showed up to fight. Better than some. You know, obviously Jose Aldo wasn't able to do the same thing. But I'm looking forward to that big rematch. I think I heard Dana White saying after the fact, Megan O'Leary was talking to Dana White saying that Frankie Edgar went into the room at Conor McGregor saying, you know, if Jose is out, too long, that I want to take the next shot. But I think that Jose should be back from this bruised rib, and I wouldn't mind seeing that the unification fight before the end of the year.
I'd love to see that too, but with the USADA taking away the IV rehydration system,
yeah.
and a lot of, and I agree with Dana White, like it might not have been as much as the bruised rib of the fact that Jose can't make the weight.
Yeah.
And
I heard that.
Yeah, and I don't even know if we'll see Jose come back at 45. I'm sure he will, because the money will be there for him to make it. But
that's $1 million
I'm telling you,
payday.
Connor and Aldo aren't going to be making 45, both of them, for that much longer.
No, exactly. Big payouts on this one. It's that Mendez and McGregor topped the pay scales at $500K apiece. That's $500,000. We're getting up there with these boys now.
I mean, Chad, I felt sorry for a little bit. He took the fight on 2 weeks' notice, and you saw his conditioning when we called that the fight of the year last year when he fought Jose Aldo in Brazil.
Yep.
The second time.
Yep.
What a war. I mean,
Yep.
he looked more tired in the first 2 minutes of the first round than he did
in the fifth
round of that fight.
That's
so,
right.
I'd like to see Chad with a full training camp. I really think that him and Frankie Edgar got to fight and get this settled. Obviously, Frankie Edgar is a dangerous opponent. The UFC knows that. A guy that could very well take out Conor McGregor, but Conor McGregor is the hype train. He's breaking all these records. He's making all this money. So it seems like the UFC is shying away from the whole Frankie Edgar matchup.
Yeah, a little bit, because they know that could be the style to dethrone the champ, and
exactly.
that's their money, man, right? Connor's gonna be selling tickets for a long time. He's still a pretty young guy, and despite the meniscus injury, he's pretty healthy. So,
and I think you're right. I think they're going to let him heal up. We've recently heard that he's going to be doing the the Ultimate Fighter season 22 with Uriah Faber. So that's going to give him time to heal. That's going to give Jose time to heal. That's going to keep him in the public eye, and that's going to build that fight for hopefully like October or November.
Absolutely. And before we wrap this incredible card, absolutely, I agree with you. It's definitely 100% the best card I've ever seen. But there were some new elements they added to this card. So the new production package they had, the graphics they had on the, it looked very like NFL primetime-esque. They're getting up to the big boys.
I really enjoyed the graphics. I love the way, you could see the cage floor where they put those graphics on there, and you could see the Irish flag, and it almost looked like it was moving. It was excellent to be able to bring in those Grammy lifts and have those guys have their favorite singers be able to sing for them. I mean, that was a big step in the right for the UFC direction. I mean, they're still working on the Reebok apparel. To me, it kind of looked a lot the same, and certain colors didn't match.
It looks pretty cookie cutter
to me. But they'll work on that. They're trying, so I thought it was all right.
Yeah, exactly. As far as the uniforms go, it was a decent first effort, but it definitely leaves a lot to be desired for me. It looks like something that you could pick up in Target. You know what I mean? Like, it's not something I would necessarily want to wear. Not a bad first crack at it. But before we move on, you said, of course, that Conor McGregor came out to Sinead O'Connor. Did you hear who Jose Aldo was supposed to come out to?
Oh, Rihanna.
That's
exactly. That's amazing. Yeah, and that's disappointing that we didn't get to see that, but I'm sure we're going to see that now because the fans loved it, and the UFC wants to spend money to make this thing. So I think we're going to see that in the future now.
It was really well received. Yeah. I definitely think this was the very beginning of some big acts coming to the UFC.
Dana White said he didn't really like. The reason he never did it in the past is because he's not into the microphones with the boxers coming out with the guy singing beside them. That's something he was never really interested in. So he knew that if he was going to do it, he wanted to spend the money and do it right. Because those actual Grammy lifts that they used for Sinead and Mendez's guys were actually borrowed from the Grammys. They're the only 1 and 2 in the world lifts they have like that. So they actually had to pay a lot of money to the Grammys to borrow those. So I think they're going to be doing that in the future for bigger events.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. All right, so let's move on to the last fight of the weekend, and we'll be right up to date, which is UFC Fight Night on Sunday, which was last night between UFC Fight Night with the main event, obviously between Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Jake the Juggernaut Ellenberger. But before we get to the main event, let's backtrack a little bit with a really great addition to the UFC roster in Michelle Waterson. Oh,
Michelle Waterson, she's an excellent fighter, really exciting. Showed she has a really well-rounded game. They call her the karate hottie.
The karate hottie, yeah.
So everyone was expecting her to come out there with flashy kicks and punches, but she did a little bit, but her main body of work was on the ground.
Yes.
She took her back, choked her out, controlled her on the ground, and that's where Angela wanted to go, and Michelle beat her at the same place that Angela wanted to be. So I was impressed with her performance. A lot of people weren't sure. She's a 5'1" girl. She's the former 105-pound Atom champion of Invicta, so people weren't sure how she was going to do against taller, bigger girls at 115 that were used to the UFC regimen,
Yeah, and we found out pretty quickly. Magana was in deep water from the very beginning. It just seemed like two different skill levels out there. But yeah, Watterson looked great. You're right in the fact that, she did have some really nice clean kicks. So, you definitely saw the karate style with the front leg side kick and stuff like that. But at the same time, her the transitions on the ground. She looked really heavy on top and finished, she escaped a tight armbar and then finished the fight with an armbar of her own.
I think you're right. I think Team Jackson and Winklejohn in Albuquerque is a great place for the women because there's a lot of competition there. You got Sarah Kaufman, Holly Holm, Michelle Watterson, and it just goes on and on. A lot of pro boxers and kickboxers there. So I think these girls are pushed to the limit and they have lots of competition and training.
Yeah, definitely. Looking forward to Michelle Watterson. What a great signing that was. All right, moving on from Watterson, we're going to go right into another crafty veteran in Jorge Masvidal and Cesar Ferreira. I thought this was a mismatch on paper. Ferreira did a little better than I thought, but it still was quite a mismatch. Masvidal he's too crafty. He's got too many tools, and he definitely made short work of Ferreira.
It was interesting. People weren't really sure because, Masvidal's a 155-pound fighter. Mm-hmm. He's fought there his whole career. And for him to come up to 170, that's a whole different ballgame. The size of the man that fights a 170 compared to the size of the man that fights a 155 is completely different. But like you said, Masvidal came in there. Ferreira got him against the cage, tried to do some clinch work, keep him close, grind him out, and drain his energy. So he tried to do the right thing. But like you said, fundamentally, once Masvidal got some space and was able to use his striking and land his punches and kicks, it was devastating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the addition to the 170 roster of Masvidal because there's so many great matchups for him now. He was saying afterwards too, at 55, when he got up in the morning, the day after the weigh-ins, he felt sluggish and he couldn't move. And his particular strategy is he likes, most guys know this, but he likes to get up in the morning, the night of the fights, the morning of the fights, and do sprints. And he said, usually I get up, I feel really sluggish and tired. He said, when I got up this time, I felt great. I felt strong. I did my sprints. I felt the best I've ever felt. So I don't think he has any intention of going back to 155. Do you? No. And he looks too healthy and too strong, and he hasn't given himself a reason to. He had a great showing, a great debut at 170, and I think we're going to see a lot of big things from him at that weight class.
I hope so. I definitely hope so.
All right, moving on from Masvidal, we're going to go for Kamaru Usman, who was the Black Zillions representative in the finals, who came out with a really big win. The guy has some high level wrestling, and he's looking great. He looks undefeated.
Yeah, it was surprising. Hyder was the one that actually won the show for the American Top Team with 3 victories. Michael Graves was the only other guy that actually won a fight for American Top Team in the competition, and Hyder was coming out knocking guys out, destroying guys with punches, but a lot of people didn't think he had a very well-rounded game, and there was a lot of back and forth stuff going on with him and Kamaru. Yeah. And he was saying that he's not well-rounded, and, I'm going to take away his striking, and that's exactly what he did. And, I got to give Hyder credit. He had 3 fights on the show in 60 days, so he had to cut weight in 60 days 3 times, and that last fight he had was an absolute war, which... it was a split decision. I had the split decision going the other way because you could see the damage in his face. Hyder was landing a nice jab, but the other guy was landing big punches, and you could see the marks on his face. But they gave Hyder the decision, and he deserved it. And he wasn't well-rounded enough for Kimura.
Yeah, exactly. Usman just, implemented his game plan. Really strong, powerful man, and just imposed his will and came out with another big win. And he's got a lot of momentum rolling behind him now.
And I liked it. I thought those were the 2 toughest guys on the show, and
good matchup, right?
Great matchup, and the coaches it wasn't one of those shows where they fought their way and maybe somebody was injured and somebody wasn't expected to win got there. Like, these were the best guys, and the coaches put these guys in there in position to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was the right 2 guys to do it, and the main event definitely didn't disappoint. All right, so let's move on to the real main event of the night, which was Stephen Thompson versus Jake Ellenberger. I had this one going this way. I obviously didn't think it was going to end in the fashion that it did, but I think Thompson is just too technical for a guy like Ellenberger. I think if Ellenberger were to have won this fight, he would have needed to be a lot more greasy. We need to be really grind him out, get him close to the cage, and make it a clinch battle or a wrestling battle, which is the Juggernaut's background. Why isn't he going back to his fundamentals of wrestling and make it a battle?
I have to agree, but I think Thompson's really good friends with Chris Weidman, so he's been training with Longo and Sarah and Chris Weidman in Long Island. talent, and I think his wrestling is vastly improved, his clinch game.
We did see it actually, yeah.
And we totally saw it. And I think people don't realize that Ellenberger has been fading for a long time. He lost a few fights in a row, and you could see he wasn't mentally there. I thought he might even retire, and I think he was contemplating retirement. Then he got the fight with Koscheck, who is in actually a worse position than him. He got that front choke and choked him out, but I don't think it improved him as a fighter, and I don't think it took away the insecurities he has as a fighter, and Stephen Thompson exposed them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stephen Thompson, man, this kid is just like a perfect specimen. You know what I mean? He's been brought up the right way. He under the tutelage of the GSP and the TriStar camp. Back in the days, I remember there in the promo for this one, they were talking about bringing in Thompson for GSP to help him with some of the fighters. So yeah, you're
exactly right. Like, I mean, if you're going with Faraz Zahabi and GSP and Rory McDonald's, and now you're training with Chris Weidman and Sarah and Longo, I mean, you can't get any better training or any better camps than that. You know what I'm saying?
Even Luke Rockhold said he brought in Thompson to train from
Oh,
Cheetah.
really? Did he? Oh, yeah. That's amazing. Well, there you go. Like, what? And I mean, that's AKA. So those are three of the best camps in the world. I mean, outside of Jackson Winklejohn. So, you know, what else? You know, he's obviously got to experience a lot of different athletes and a lot of different coaches to get him in the position he is right now.
Man, that karate style is he's just so technical. To finish up, so he rocks him with was it spinning hook kick or spinning heel kick?
I think it was a spinning heel kick. Yeah,
spinning heel kick.
It seemed like it just got over his glove and just touched the top of the temple. And you've talked about that before.
But the first one, the first one really connected, I think, and then the second one just kind of like dusted him. But man, yeah, big things coming for Stephen Thompson. You know, a really nice, consummate professional of a guy too. You know, he definitely has respect for Juggernaut and has respect for the sport. And yeah, I'm looking forward to see what's next for him.
I agree 100%.
All right, that is going to do it for another episode of Combat Sports Live. Be sure to check us out next month when we cover Dillashaw Barao 2, Rousey versus Kohea, and a whole lot more. Until then, on behalf of myself and Keith Nadasen, be sure to keep your chin down, and we'll check you next time.
Maybe we can rebel, you keep it telling, I keep in touch. If you've been taking all that's given, your only sin is receiving, you ain't leaving much. So why even rush? We got the shit in the bag, and if it's dragging along, we roll the weed in Dutch. I keep the flow rolling, miss out on no moments. We moving in, they at the door, but they just won't hold it. Should've expected cold shoulders, but once I get into the spot, like damn right, I'm a showboat it. Holy moly, never known me to be faithful, but you couldn't sign up for it thinking this was stable. Just get me on the payroll, I'll stay gold, and I've been fighting for this since we was a day old.
God only knows what we're fighting for. God only knows what we're fighting for. God only knows what we're fighting for. God only knows what we're fighting for.
Yeah, screaming out freedom like the great William Wallace. They gonna ban this tape in every state, city, and province. I stay spitting that rush, they hate it but can't stop it. When it go up in flames, I'll be blazing sticky chronic. Now tell me, why would you fight a war? Don't know what you're fighting for. Try and rebel, they lock you inside of a cell. A psycho wrote all of the rights ignored without having to sign a form. It happens behind closed doors, shot you reach your mind's a war. Your privacy don't exist, nobody's safe inside their homes. They got us on a surveillance, webcams and microphones. Filling the sky with drones, got no use for my attorney. The tides are turning, the Bible's burning, shorty, the fight is on. For the poverty-stricken fathers, mamas, and children, hard up and living without a pot to piss and robbing and stealing. To the wrongly convicted, locked inside prison. To the baby you armed to kill in the name of God and religion. Can I get a hoorah?
God only knows what we're fighting for. God only knows what we're fighting for. God only knows what we're fighting for. God only knows what we're fighting for.
So what you fighting for? We'll just keep fighting for it. I seen the light so many times, it's getting kinda boring. It's like a war, despite it, why ignore it? It's ride or die, so hell, it might as well be worth dying for it. Just know there's more to see, don't think it was born to be. Condition my environment now, it's supplying more to me. I'm mind disorderly, born more than just quarterly. With stories of more corners than yours, sure to be torn between. I want them easily, share fair with their portion equal. Distorted people with more seed to restore evil. The poor and feeble, we quarantine with the warm meal. Without cash, trying to sew the patch up with the war needle. And all we need is just peace of mind. The reason I'm even up to speaking is grievance against the weak and I compete with time, with heathen lies, deceiving lives. They need divides.